All right, team, here we are again. We are entering into Unit 4, which will cover the information on Test 4. And this chapter deals primarily with the classification of living things. And so we're going to systematically go through each of the domains and kingdoms and talk about what's in them. The primary topics are going to be the taxonomy. And you can see here we're in module 3, and this is the important sheet for this particular unit. It says taxonomy list for test 4. And so in just a moment, I'm going to click on that. We have a little bit of preliminary stuff. I'm assuming that everyone has watched the YouTube video that is on taxonomy or classification. It's very important that you watch that before we move on. And so if you haven't watched that, be sure to do so as soon as you can. It explains sort of the science of taxonomy, and it'll help to sort of make this taxonomy list make a little more sense and be a little clearer. Before we do that, we're going to do just a brief chalk and talk, and we want to understand a little bit about living things and some general ways that we can group things. Okay, so how can we group living things? Well, right away, prokaryotic and eukaryotic. Okay, so all cells can be classified, and that means all living things can be classified as either being prokaryotic or eukaryotic. We've mentioned this before. Biggest difference is that prokaryotic organisms have no nucleus in their cells, and of course eukaryotic organisms do. Here's a simple way to remember. There are 3 domains in classification, and one is the archaea, and a second is the bacteria, and a third is the eukaryota. Okay, so domain is above kingdom in the taxonomic scheme of things. So what are these organisms? Well, traditionally, these organisms have been referred to as bacteria in quotes, and now I'm not using bacteria taxonomically, I'm just using it as sort of a group of organisms. So the bacteria collectively make up all the prokaryotic organisms on Earth. That's important to know. There are 2 domains, the archaea and the bacteria, and you'll see these both on the sheet. Everything else that lives on the Earth is in the eukaryota. All other living things are eukaryotic. That includes what? Well, what else is left? We have fungi, we have plants, animals, and protists. Okay, so we have these other 4 groups of organisms, and they're all eukaryotic. If you can just remember that the bacteria are the prokaryotic organisms and everything else is eukaryotic, you're going to be in good shape. So that's an important lesson. And when we do the taxonomy of all living things, of course, we have to go through and talk a little bit about the prokaryotic organisms, and then we'll talk about the eukaryotic. Okay. There's this word phylogeny. Oops. And phylogeny is a good word to know. What does it mean? Evolutionary relatedness. And so when we study taxonomy, we try to study it as best we can in phylogenetic order, but heck, we're just guessing, right? We don't know for sure what things are related and what things aren't, okay? But that's just a good word to know, phylogeny. This is a Y, sorry, okay. Now, some other ways that we might be able to group organisms, aside from prokaryotic and eukaryotic. How do they make their living? Autotrophic, or heterotrophic. All of the things on the sheet, all of the taxonomy, you should be able to apply one of these two words. Every living thing on earth is either autotrophic or heterotrophic. Some things are both, but for the most part, it's one or the other. So what does this mean? If you're autotrophic, it simply means that you can make sugar. And if you're heterotrophic, you can't make sugar. Very simple definition. What do we mean make sugar? Well, you already know that. How do you make sugar? Photosynthesis, or this oddball thing called chemosynthesis. Okay, and we won't really talk much about chemosynthesis. Suffice it to say, it's an alternative pathway to make sugar. It doesn't use light, it uses heat as the source of energy. And so there's that. Now, everything else, if you're not photosynthetic or chemosynthetic, then you can't make sugar. And we say that you're heterotrophic. One of the things that we often apply here are, we say these are the producers and these are the consumers, right? You have to be careful about the consumers part is fine because we can't make sugar, but we use it up. Producers, be careful. Remember, photosynthetic organisms, they go in both directions. They do cellular respiration. So yeah, they're producers, but they consume what they produce. So be aware of that. Okay, so just these are, what I'm saying is every organism, every kingdom, every division or phylum that we go through, I would expect you to be able to tell me, well, is it autotrophic or heterotrophic? Okay. And you know, some kingdoms have both. You know, the bacteria, the domain bacteria has both photosynthetic and heterotrophic organisms. Okay, one other thing I want you to know about these organisms is the life form. Okay, the most obvious life form is kind of like what we are, and we are truly multicellular three-dimensional organisms, right? Animals are multicellular three-dimensional organisms. Plants are multicellular three-dimensional organisms. But there are other life forms to think about. Some organisms are unicellular. For example, the bacteria, or certain bacteria, and also certain protists. One cell makes the entire organism. This is kind of strange. Another life form is called colonial. And in a colonial life form, you have, here, let me just draw one little cell with some flagella, because usually the unicellular guys are flagellated and they can swim around. Colonial, you have several individuals living in a colony together, individual cells. And so you could imagine this unicellular flagellated organism living with some other friends like this. And I'll put their little flagellas all poking out. And what they're living in is usually like this gelatinous matrix, this kind of a gooey matrix, and they're all stuck in it. Okay, that's colonial. What about a fourth level? And you could imagine these are getting more complex, multicellular being the most complex. I should have done that at the end, probably. Filamentous. Filamentous organisms can have many cells. But here's the crazy thing. When cell division occurs, mitosis, and they make more cells, it can only happen in a single plane. And so filamentous organisms, if that's your life form, you can only get longer. You can't get any taller or thicker. And you could imagine that must be a little frustrating for these organisms, I would imagine. So we'll stop there with life forms. There's one other one called phallic, but we're not going to worry about it. Okay. So, you know, it's nice to know what the life form is of the organisms. Most of them are obvious, but the thing is, if you know what the organism looks like, you know its life form. Okay. And I think that's probably enough preliminary stuff. So we're going to open up this PowerPoint, and I'm going to tell you that the test, the way that you'll be tested is as a giant matching or series of matching sections. That's part of the test. So it's really important that you know the taxonomy, but the good news is you don't really have to know how to spell everything because it's matching. And that's going to be nice because you'll see when I open up this taxonomy sheet, there's some kind of wacky words, right? There's some kind of wacky words. So let me zoom in a little, make it a little bigger. That's probably good. And I'll scroll down and you can just see the complete list. We start, the list isn't really necessarily in phylogenetic order all the way, but you can see we have the domain archaea and the domain bacteria. These are all the prokaryotic organisms. Then we have the kingdom fungi. Now we're in domain eukaryote. I should have included that. I apologize. I'll write that in. We have kingdom fungi and its divisions. We have kingdom protista with its phyla and divisions. We'll talk about why those are different names. The plantae and the animalia. And you can see when we get down to the animals, we go into class. So we go from phylum into classes. But for the most part, we're studying these on the kingdom division or kingdom phylum level. Okay, that's just a convenient way to study it. So we're at the top of the hierarchy of taxonomy. If we tried to study it on the species level, well, there's so many species, we couldn't do it. It would be impossible. So we're being generalists here in our study of these. In addition to knowing the taxonomy on this list, and the way that it's going to work is, what you're going to need to know for the kingdoms is, if I string a bunch of words together that describes the kingdom, you should be able to match it to that kingdom. And we'll talk about that more. And then for the rest of the taxonomy, sort of the common name or group name or non-taxonomic name that identifies this group of organisms. So just to give you an example, the Basidiomycota in the kingdom fungi includes mushrooms and shelf fungi and puffballs. So that gives you an idea. And we're going to look at pictures of all of these and all that. Okay. Today, I just want to make it through this taxonomy sheet, and I want to give you the names, because guess what? That's going to be like 75% of the test is just being able to do that. Okay. To do that matching. The other 25% is going to be the human relevance of these groups. And you're going to be watching a lot of videos, and you're going to be not responsible for most of the information in the video, which seems crazy, and you can even skip over it if it's the life cycle or something like that, or you may be interested. What you are responsible for is the human relevance of the group. You know, how, for example, is the Ascomycota important to humans? Okay. All right, so let's get started. I'm going to annotate this list as we go. And I'm going to give you, and a lot of these you're not going to know what they are yet because we haven't studied them, but I just want to go ahead and, you know, give you this list at this point so that you'll have it. Now, one of the things you might want to do is print this sheet out, and you can come back and rewatch this video so that you can make your own list here. Okay, or you could screenshot it at the end, I suppose. But at any rate, you're going to need this. You're going to need to have a running list of these. So what about the archaea? Without getting into any details, these organisms include methanogens, which are methane-producing bacteria, loosely speaking, thermophiles, which are thermophilic heat lovers, and halophytes. Halophytes are salt lovers. These are heat lovers and salt lovers and methane producers, okay? The bacteria is all other prokaryotic organisms, including pathogens, right? Including all of those bacteria that make you sick, including, you know, we'll make a big long list of them and talk about them in at another time, another video. Okay. That's it for the prokaryotes. These two groups, these two domains are it for the prokaryotes. We don't put the prokaryotes in kingdoms anymore. Okay. I will tell you, you may come across this word, Monera, in your study. This is the old kingdom for the bacteria. We used to put all the bacteria in the kingdom Monera, and they've changed that. As we talked about in our video, you know, taxonomy is always changing and people are always arguing about it. What about the fungi? Can we string some words together to describe this kingdom? Absolutely. Are they prokaryotic or eukaryotic? They are eukaryotic. Are they heterotrophic or autotrophic? Can fungi photosynthesize? They cannot. They're exclusively heterotrophic. Some other things about them, they are spore producing and filamentous in life form. There are some exceptions, the yeasts being the exception to this. The yeasts are actually unicellular. So we might say unicellular in the yeasts. Okay. All fungi produce spores. They all grow in a filamentous fashion. You've seen the filaments. It looks like cotton. You know, think about your strawberry or your moldy bread, and you can see the white filaments growing on it. Okay. So now we have, within the kingdom fungi, we have divisions. We could use phylum or division here. Traditionally, we've used the word division in the fungi, even though we're supposed to use division for plant-like things, and fungi are nothing like plants, which is what we're going to learn about. What about the zygomycota? These are the molds and mildews, everyone's favorite fungi. No. Molds and mildews. The ascomycota are the cup fungi. And yeasts. This group includes the yeasts. Now you start thinking about human relevance. My goodness, humans have been using yeast to ferment things, to make alcohol and to leaven bread for thousands of years. We'll talk a lot more about it. The Basidiomycota is the largest group. It includes the following. It includes the mushrooms. It includes shelf fungi. You're going to learn about what all these are. Just write them down for now. It includes puffballs, coral fungi, and that's probably enough. Okay. The Deuteromycota, these are traditionally called the imperfect fungi. And we call them that because they don't have sex, no sex. No one has ever observed these organisms doing sexual reproduction. No meiosis and fusion for these guys. How do they reproduce? Asexually. They're really good at it. And some examples that you should know is penicillium. Why is penicillium as a genus important? Well, that's where we got the first known antibiotic from. You're going to learn all about that too. Okay, so that takes care of the fungi. And so we're just going to keep going through this. It's going to, you know, it's going to take a second, but we'll make it through. I can't scroll down while still annotating. Let's see, maybe I can. I don't want to clear it. There we go. Okay. Now I can, oh, the words don't move though. Okay, well, so hopefully you've copied all that down because we're going to have to erase it in order to continue on. Okay. Here we go. Bye-bye. Life is funny that way, huh? All right, adios. We've made it through the fungi. Let's keep going. We'll scroll on up. Now we get to the Protista as a kingdom, and some confusion here. Phylum and division, I just want you to understand, are the same level of taxonomy, the same higher level of hierarchy. And I think I mentioned in the taxonomy lecture how the experts got together and they decided phylum was inappropriate as this level under kingdom in the taxonomic hierarchy for whatever reason, something to do with its meaning in Latin. And they voted and they said, okay, we're going to get rid of the word phylum and instead we're going to use the word division. And they voted and everybody agreed except the zoologists. The zoologists were like, no way, we're not changing. So now we have this sort of, if it's an animal or animal-like thing, we use the word phylum. And if it's a plant or plant-like thing, we use the word division. For the fungi, they're sort of the oddball, and we don't know which one to use. Okay. What are these? What about the Protista as a kingdom? It's kind of like a garbage kingdom. It's almost like if something doesn't fit anywhere else, put it in the Protista. So this group can include unicellular to multicellular, plant-like, and animal-like eukaryotes. Okay, plant-like in the subkingdom algae and animal-like in the subkingdom protozoa. Okay, so I'm going to add a little note here. What about these? These are all in the subkingdom protozoa. And these are the animal-like things, for lack of a better way to describe them. You're gonna learn all about them. Don't worry. I know it's a little confusing, but I think it's helpful to go through this at the beginning so that you have it all as we talk about these. And then this group, the divisions here are the subkingdom algae, and they are plant-like, which you kind of know a little bit about algae probably. Okay, so we have these two subkingdoms. And included in these are the 4 phyla and 4 divisions of organisms. And now we want to know, what are these things? The mastigophorans are the flagellates. Now, it should make sense to you if these things are animal-like, they're heterotrophic, right? So the protozoans are heterotrophic, the algae are autotrophic. And, you know, that's, let's just do this auto and hetero. So you remember, it has this kingdom, Protista, contains both autotrophic and heterotrophic, autotrophic plant-like, heterotrophic animal-like. So the flagellates are these unicellular organisms. They swim around in water and they look for stuff to eat, or they could be parasites. Ciliophora are the ciliates. What's the difference between flagella and cilia? Not a whole lot. If there's a few and they're long, we call them flagella. If there's a whole bunch and they're shorter, we call them cilia. Either way, it's locomotion, right? The sarcodyna are the amoebas. These organisms move via amoeboid motion. And then the last group, the apicomplexa, are non-motile. They don't have a way to move. At the very best, they can wiggle. Okay, we're going to talk about these. And they're obligate parasites. This group includes Plasmodium, which is one of the most important parasites on Earth. And we'll talk about what Plasmodium is. Darn it, I wish I could write a little better. Here, I'm going to scribble that out. Look. Plasmodium is a genus. Okay, so these are the unicellular, they're animal-like things. These are plant-like things, and they can range from unicellular to multicellular. Let's see what these things are. The chlorophyta are the green algae. The phaeophyta are the browns, also known as the kelps. And then the pyrophyta are the dinoflagellates, and the chrysophyta are the diatoms. These are all going to be matching. So you on the test, you need to know, oh, pyrophyta are the dinoflagellates and chrysophyta are the diatoms. It's seems a little more difficult now because we haven't talked about these organisms in any detail. Once we've done that, it's not going to be a big deal. Okay. It's going to be an easy test. So that covers the kingdom Protista. Just to reiterate, we have two subkingdoms. We have the heterotrophic protozoans, which are animal-like. We have the autotrophic algae, which are plant-like. They're stuck in the same kingdom. Now, people always ask, why are these unlike organisms in the same kingdom? There are some similarities in life cycles, and that's about as good as it's going to get. Okay. All right, let's get rid of those and keep going. Moving right along. Now we're into things that you know about, plants and animals. Okay. And so we can definitely string some words together to describe the plants. What makes a plant different from an algae, for example? Cell walls of cellulose is one thing. Let me get my pen back here. So what about plantae? They are eukaryotic, autotrophic, and they have chlorophyll A and B. It turns out that other photosynthetic organisms, like there are photosynthetic bacteria, for example, and also the algae, they don't have both chlorophyll A and B. Mostly they just have chlorophyll A. So these strung together. And then the other thing is they are multicellular. All plants are multicellular. Okay. What are these things? Bryophyta are the mosses. Hepatophyta are the liverworts, and you probably don't know what that is yet, but you're going to learn. Pterophyta are the ferns. Now, I'd be willing to bet that although you may not know what a liverwort is, you could probably point out a moss or a fern, right? Splenophyta are the horsetails. Cycadophyta are the cycads. Coniferophyta are the conifers. Some examples: spruce, fir, pine. You could identify a conifer. Ginkgophyta, there's only one known species of Ginkgophyta, and it's called Ginkgo biloba. Ginkgo biloba. Okay. So we have these groups, and then there's one more, and I think it's on the next page, but I'm going to write it out here. So you have them all together. Magnoliophyta are the flowering plants. And again, I realize that to a certain extent, this is a little bit meaningless to you maybe because you don't know what these things are yet, but you're going to learn. I promise. You're going to watch the videos and you're going to learn. Okay. All right, team. And then last but not least, we have the Animalia. Okay. Oops. We have the Animalia. There's Magnoliophyta. You see it there. Now, let me shrink this down a little bit, maybe, so we can fit it all. Can we fit it all? Almost at 140. Let's go a little smaller. Hate to go too much smaller, but okay, there we go. We fit it all on there now. Look at all these things. Now, this is the first time that we've gone further than phylum into the taxonomy, and we're going into class. So remember, it goes kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. Well, we're going to, some of these phyla, we're going to go into the class. Okay, and we'll see why in a bit. Here we go. Okay, here we go. What about stringing words together to describe? Man, this thing's in my way. There we go. Stringing words together to describe the animalia. Well, they're eukaryotic, heterotrophic. And if you recall, there's an organelle that's missing in animals that's present in pretty much all the other groups. No cell wall, right? So that eukaryotic heterotrophic no cell walls is a dead ringer for animalia. What are these things? Porifera are the sponges. Oh, they're exciting. May not have even known a sponge was an animal, but it is. Now, most sponges you buy from the Ingalls are synthetic sponges, but you can buy real sea sponges. You've probably seen them. The Cnidaria are the jellyfish and corals. Corals are just clusters of little teeny jellyfish, which is kind of crazy. Yep, that's those two. Nematoda are the round worms. Example, Ascaris. These include things like heartworms, not tapeworms, but heartworms. Platyhelminthes are the flatworms, which include tapeworms. Yuck. Mollusca are the mollusks. What are mollusks? Snail. Slug. What about sea mollusks? Conchs. Octopus. Squid. Lots of those. Arthropoda are all animals that contain exoskeleton of this stuff called chitin. Chitin is a polysaccharide similar to cellulose. What do we have? Now we're taking this phylum Arthropoda and we're going into the next level, which is the class level. And you know these insects, spiders. Horseshoe crabs are actually spiders, not crabs. And then crustacea include the other kind of crabs, lobsters, shrimp. Okay. Any land crustaceans? Crawfish. Annelida are earthworms. Which are segmented worms. Echinodermata includes sand dollars and starfish. Okay. Chordata. Now we're moving down the phylogenetic ladder here. Chordata are the chordates. They have a spinal cord. Okay. Reptilia, obviously, are the reptiles. For example, what? Snakes, turtles. Amphibia are the amphibians. Mammalia are the mammals. Aves are the birds. And osteichthyes are the bony fish. Okay, now you have all of the taxonomy and its associated organisms that go with it. And there are going to be a few to add as we actually go through the taxonomy. You'll be watching videos talking about these different organisms. I'll walk you through the Animalia, for example, and we'll talk about each of these and what makes them in this group and how they're relevant and blah, blah, blah. Okay, so we have a lot more to do, but I feel good now because now you have this nice sheet of taxonomy. It's all been kind of done for you. How's it going to work? Well, there's going to be a matching for the Animalia, and you're going to have to be able to match sponges with porifera and tapeworms with platyhelminthes and octopus and squid with mollusca, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. I think that does it for this lecture. And I hope, I realize that there's some dissimilarity in going through it before we actually know what they are, but it'll be helpful to have this master list so that when we do go through it, you'll have the taxonomy in front of you. And again, what we just went over is literally, I'm going to say, I don't want to say 75, I'm going to say at least 60% of the next test, probably closer to 75% of the next test is just this taxonomy in a matching format. So start studying it. You can start studying it at any time. Okay. All right, team. I hope that you found that helpful, and I'll catch you on the return. I'll circle back. Bye-bye. See you later.